iti namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Hare.
I Om Vishnupad Purnamhansa Pariprajaka Ashto Tarasata Sri Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nama Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Tham Ki Jai Navadip Tham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Go.
Haribol, Jai Maharaj. Welcome everyone to Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. Today is June 12th, Monday. It's the disappearance day of Srivas Pandit. And we're reading in the third canto, chapter 20, Conversation between Maitreya and Vidura. And we're taking it up again tonight with text 13. And as always, Maharaj welcomes your questions and comments, so please use the raise hand feature or simply unmute yourself and speak when Maharaj asks for questions, or you can type your comments into the chat window. Just please remember to not send any chat messages as Maharaj is reading something there. It makes it more difficult to read. And at the end of class, I'll post some links in the chat that you can share with your friends so that they can attend as well. And if anyone wants to lead the closing kirtan, send me a message in the chat. Maharaj, we're so glad that you could join us from New York City. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much to Sipriya. And thank you to all. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Raja Pradhanan Mahatas Trilingo Daivachoditat Shata Shata Sasarja Putadir Vyadadini Panchashaha. As impelled by the destiny of the jiva, the false ego, which is of three kinds, evolved from the Mahatattva, in which the element of rajas predominates. And the ego, in turn, evolved many groups of 5 principles. Purport. The primordial matter, or prakriti, material nature, consisting of 3 modes, generates 4 groups of 5. The first group is called elementary and consists of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Second group of 5 is called tanmatra, referring to the subtle elements, sense objects, sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. The third group is the 5 sense organs for acquiring knowledge: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. The fourth group is the 5 working senses: speech, hands, feet, anus, and genitals. Some say that there are 5 groups of 5. One group is the sense objects, one is the 5 elements, one is the 5 sense organs for acquiring knowledge, another is the senses for working, and the 5th group is the 5 deities who control these divisions. Om Gana Timirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jena Tasvai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Tadhati Shapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Shahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Pradijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Shahagana Lolita Sri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vacha Kolpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Raja Prathanan Mahatas Trilingo Daiva Chodita Jata Sasarja Puta Dir Vyadadini Panchasha. So in this chapter, very briefly, there'll be a reprise of the description given earlier in this canto of the creation of the universe. First, we have Mahat, the primordial material nature. And when Daiva Choditat, because of the desires and past history of the jivas, the material nature is agitated by the will of the Lord, and the false ego appears. Bhuta Adi, the false ego, and so on. And from the false ego, we get Vyat Adini, the various manifestations appear, beginning from ether, which means the five elements. Prabhupada, it's interesting here, Prabhupada says the first group is called elementary and consists of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. That threw me at first. You think of elementary as being basic. Here, elementary in Prabhupada's language means having to do with the elements. The elementary creation is not a simple creation. It's the creation of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, the gross material elements. That's the first creation. Then we have tanmatras, the sense objects, which are subtle: sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. Then we have the knowledge-acquiring senses, the gyanendriyas, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Then the karmendriyas, the tongue for speech, hands, feet, anus, and genitals. And a fifth is also possible, the deities controlling all this. You might remember that we had a chart which appears in Gopal Hari's book on the Bhagavatam. Let's see if I can call that up for you. We'll give it a shot. Yeah. Okay, so that you're now supposed to be able to see my screen. Everyone can see it but me, so let me move a little bit. Here we go. And this is, again, from Gopal Hari's book, Maya and the Bhagavad Purana, very useful book. And you can see we have the Mahatattva, from which false ego appears, and then it comes in three divisions, predominated by passion, goodness, and ignorance. So we have three groups. You see Sattvika, Ahankar, Rajasa, or rather, do I have it right? Yeah, and then Tamasa. So in these three groups, we get the, and let's see if that we get it all right, because I'm looking here. Yes. In the middle, you'll see the sense organs. On the right side, the material elements. So that's your elementary creation. Then you have your your 10 senses in two groups. And then you have a last group, which is the demigods in charge of the various divisions. So this all evolves from the Mahatattva through the false ego and down to these 5 groups in 3 divisions according to the modes of material nature, and so on. Okay, let me stop sharing. Unless you want me to keep sharing. Any questions or comments here so far? Okay. And we'll stop sharing. Good. There, we can look at Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. He says that the Mahatattva is initially predominantly in sattva, but when the ahankar appears, it becomes predominated by Rajagun. So that's indicated in this verse, right? We can look back a little bit. Yeah. Here it said the element of Rajas predominates, so it predominates once the false ego is there. And this form of Mahatattva with Rajas predominating is called Sutra. We'll find that word not in Srila Prabhupada's commentaries, but it comes fairly often in the commentaries of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, this Sutra, or the form of Mahatattva in passion. Okay, Tulsi Priya, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, Maharaj, thank you. I was wondering, as devotees say that if somebody gets Mahaprasadam, they will take a human birth. And I was wondering if we don't take that into consideration, is it that if, I'm wondering what it takes to take a human birth.
You're pretty far from the verse, aren't you?
Well, yeah, I guess I am, sorry. I was just, because I was thinking about the modes and what it takes to become a human being, if let's say you're already a human being in your next birth.
What it takes to become a human being if you're already a human being?
In other words, in your next birth. If you're a human being now, but you're not a devotee, in your next birth.
What does it take to be a human being?
Like to be at least the mode of passion?
I can't say what the minimal requirements are. for human birth. That's up to Yamaraj company or up to the higher authorities, not necessarily Yamaraj.
Sorry if I went off topic. It's just that chart made me wonder about that.
Way off. Okay. Back to the topic. Tani Jaikai Kasha Shrashtum Asamartani Bhautikam Sanghatya Daiva Yogena Aimamandam Avasrajan. Separately unable to produce the material universe, they combined with the help of the energy of the Supreme Lord and were able to produce a shining egg. So this we've heard also before. Okay, there we go. Separately, those elements were there, these 4 or 5 groups, but they couldn't do anything. They couldn't do anything. But Daiva Yogena, with the help of the Lord's energy, Haimamandam, they produced a golden egg. We'll hear more about that. So Shayishta Pahi Sholile Andakosho Niratmakaha Sagram Vaivarsha Sahasram Angvavatsit Tamisharaha. For over 1,000 years, the shiny egg lay on the waters of the causal ocean in the lifeless state. Then the Lord entered it as Garbhodakshay Vishnu. Purport: from this verse, it appears that all the universes are floating in the causal ocean. And Vishwanath comments that they lay there because nothing was happening. The Jivas hadn't woken up yet. So they lay there for 1,000 years, and then Garbhodakshay Vishnu entered. Tasyanabher aput padmam sahasrar kodiditi sarvajivan ikayo kao yatra swayam aput swarat. From the navel of the personality of Godhead, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, sprouted a lotus flower, effulgent, like 1,000 blazing suns. This lotus flower is the reservoir of all conditioned souls. And the first living entity who came out of the lotus flower was the omnipotent Brahma. Purport: it appears from this verse that the conditioned souls who rested within the body of the personality of Godhead after the dissolution of the last creation came out in the sum total form of the lotus flower of the lotus. This is called Hiranyagarbha. We hear this term Hiranyagarbha. It has different meanings from what I understand. Sometimes it refers to Brahma, and sometimes it refers to this form of the lotus. Hiranya means, again, gold. Garbha, Garbha is like, what would you say? Unevolved being. Yeah, that would be okay. An embryo is called Garbha. The first living entity to come out was Lord Brahma, who is independently able to create the rest of the manifested universe. Swarat, Lord Brahma is called Swarat. Prabhupada translates it as omnipotent, and in the word for word meanings, independent. Lord Brahma is so powerful that he's almost independent. I think Srila Prabhupada comments on that later. The lotus is described here as effulgent as the glare of 1,000 suns. This indicates that the living entities, as parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also of the same quality, since the Lord also diffuses his bodily glare, known as Brahmanjyoti. The description of Vaikuntha Loka, as stated in Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic literatures, is confirmed herewith. Natad pasyate suryo shashanko nabhavaka. In Vaikuntha, the spiritual sky, there's no need of sunshine, moonshine, electricity, or fire. Every planet there is self-effulgent, like the sun. There's a comment. First comment is P. From P. Is that Panchatattva? I don't really know. But anyway, they combine with the help. This sounds like they're living personalities taking help of the Lord. Well, yes, there are presiding deities in charge of these elements, but they don't have to be taking the help with the help of with the help of an engineer. The bricks and the stones and the wood and so on are arranged. The Lord's certainly there's consciousness on the side of the person who's helping, but there are also personalities of material nature. But here, I don't think that's necessarily implied. I don't see that stated. But the elements are inert, and without the help of the Lord, they can't do anything. I'm sorry, let me back up. We read earlier in the third canto that the elements were praying to the Lord. Am I wrong? That we're all here, we're unable to do anything. So you please help us. That's what I recall. The elements were all there, and then these prayers were offered because the elements independently weren't able to do anything. So the prayers were offered, if I remember, by the elements themselves, so that they could combine and do what they were meant to do. Natashe says, I've heard from somewhere that just one time chanting of the Maha Mantra qualifies anyone to get a human birth. For that matter, hearing the Maha Mantra also gives us human birth. Hence the necessity to chant loudly, as mentioned by Prabhupada. Well, certainly that result can come. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato payat. Just by hearing the holy name, or just by chanting the holy name, one can be promoted to the human form of life, or freed from the greatest danger of gliding down, as Prabhupada said, to the lower regions of existence. But we shouldn't just chant once. Sonavishto Bhagavata Yashete Shalilasaye Lokasangstam Yata Purvam Nirmame Sangstaya Svaya. When that Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's lying on the Garbhodak ocean, entered the heart of Brahma, Brahma brought his intelligence to bear. And with the intelligence invoked, he began to create the universe as it was before. There are, of course, the intelligent design people who argue quite rightly that the cosmic manifestation can't merely be a result of material interactions, that there must be an intelligent designer. Oh, here in the Bhagavatam, we find that the intelligent designer is Brahma. The business of intelligently designing the universe isn't something the personality of Godhead himself takes up. He leaves it to his, or deputes it to his appointed creator, Lord Brahma. And Lord Brahma does all of that work. He's Adi Kavi, he's the original intelligent person. And so he creates the universe, he designs the universe. That's called Visarga. Sarga, the creation, is the creation of the initial elements, as we heard of in the previous verses. And now the sub-creation is the actual engineering of the universe, which is Brahma's business. Purport: at a certain time, the personality of Godhead, Karna Dakshay Vishnu, lies in the Karna ocean and produces many thousands of universes from his breathing. Then he enters again into each and every universe as Garbhodakshay Vishnu and fills up half of each universe with his own perspiration. The other half of the universe remains vacant, and that vacant region is called outer space. So we have this picture of the universe with Lord Vishnu lying on the causal ocean filling half the universe, and the other half available, as it were, for what we call outer space. Then the lotus flower sprouts from his abdomen and produces the first living creature, Brahma. Then again, as Kshirodakshay Vishnu, the Lord enters into the heart of every living entity, including Brahma. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter. The Lord says, I am seated in everyone's heart, and by me are remembrance and forgetfulness made possible. As the witness of the activities of the individual entities, the Lord gives each one remembrance and intelligence to act according to his desire at the time he was annihilated in his last birth, in the last millennium. This intelligence is invoked according to one's own capacity or by the law of karma. Therefore, we see that a lot of people act foolishly. The intelligence with which they've been endowed enables them to act perversely or with confusion or viciously, or properly according to one's past. But otherwise, we don't know why are living entities inclined in a particular way. So they're, of course, from birth to birth, they're carrying impressions, or they're receiving intelligence from the Lord to act in a certain way, or from the very beginning, which is what's described here, from the very beginning of the universe, because they go to sleep at the time of devastation. Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Ahuryad Brahmano Vidu Ratrim Sahasrantam Teho Ratravido Shanaha. That's not the verse I had in mind. Let's find the verse I had in mind. Vyakta Vyaktaya Sarve, some right? Let's see what we get. Yeah, Avyaktad Vyaktaya Sarva Prabhavantya Haragame Ratriagame Praliyante Tatraiva Vyakta Sangake Bhutagramam Bhutagrama se vayam bhutva bhutva praliyate. Patriagame vashaparta prabhavatyaharagame. So this describes in the 8th chapter the process of the creation and destruction of the living entities. The living entity is eternal, he's never created or destroyed, but at the time of devastation, he's merged into the body of the Lord, and again, at the time of creation, he comes out again. Bhutva bhutva praliyate. So there's creation and destruction again and again. And when the living entities are merged, it's not that they lose their individuality. Srila Prabhupada gives the example of honey. We get honey, and the taste from the different flowers are there in the honey. The honey is not just one undifferentiated substance, but the bees have gathered honey from different flowers. And so you have different kinds of tastes there. So the living entities are merged in the body of the Lord, but they have their individuality. And when they come out, there's the opportunity for that individuality to be expressed, and the Lord gives them the intelligence to act accordingly. Then Tulsi Priya says, Brahma's design of the material world is inspired by his vision of the spiritual world, which resulted from his meditation, is it not? I don't think I've seen that mentioned, that he took inspiration from his vision of the spiritual world. What seems to be indicated in this verse and elsewhere is that the Lord gave him inspiration or direction so that he could create the universe as it was before. There's a template, there's a design already fixed up, as it were. And Brahma is given the intelligence to bring that into existence. Does anyone know of a place where it said that creation was inspired by his vision of the spiritual world? Of course, he saw the Lord, and so in that way he was inspired in Krishna consciousness. But I don't recall any place where it said that he modeled this world essentially on that world. It's modeled rather on the direction given by the Lord Brahma was the first living entity, and he was empowered by the Supreme Lord to act in charge of the mode of passion. Therefore, he was given the required intelligence, which is so powerful and extensive that he's almost independent of the control of the personality of Godhead. Just as a highly posted manager is almost as independent as the owner of a firm, Brahma is described here as independent because, as the Lord's representative to control the universe, he's almost as powerful and independent as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this, as I mentioned before, this explains the word Swarat, which Prabhupada translated as omnipotent, or in the word for word, independent. So Brahma's described here as independent because he's almost independent. The Lord has given him great scope. And he's acting in the mode of passion, or in relation to the mode of passion, because passion is what gets things done. The Lord, as the super soul within Brahma, gave him the intelligence to create. The creative power, therefore, of every living entity is not his own. It is by the grace of the Lord that one can create. There are many scientists and great workers in this material world who have wonderful creative force, but they act and create only according to the direction of the Supreme Lord. The scientist may create many wonderful inventions by the direction of the Lord, but it's not possible for him to overcome the stringent laws of material nature by his intelligence. Nor is it possible to acquire such intelligence from the Lord, for the Lord's supremacy would then be hampered. He's not given the intelligence how to independently overcome the laws of nature. It is stated in this verse that Brahma created the universe as it was before. This means that he created everything by the same name and form as in the previous cosmic manifestation. The Brahma was inspired to create by the Lord, and other lesser beings, scientists are mentioned, are also given the opportunity to devise something, create something by the grace of the Lord. Sariputta Prabhu has dealt with this in his essay on inspiration, which appeared first in BTG and later in, I believe, in mechanistic and non-mechanistic science. And he's wonderfully described the materialistic, the physicalist notion that all of these wonderful creations are made possible by the sophisticated brain of the human being. Sariputta goes through the what's in that brain in terms of its capabilities and concludes that there's something more at play. And he gives the example of several examples of great musicians, great scientists, great mathematicians who've come up with something just by it, inexplicably, practically speaking. A symphony comes to them all composed in their head of a mathematical principle, mathematical formula comes to them just all of a sudden, even though the theorem may not be capable of proof until decades later. No one can say, how did this guy get to this theorem? It just pops out. And then big prizes are offered for anyone who can prove the theorem. And then the theorem is proven by some sort of sophisticated understanding that didn't become known till years after the death of the theorem's creator. How did he do that? Where did he get that inspiration? And then Sariputta describes the process that the musicians or the scientists say, well, I was thinking about it, and then I wasn't getting anywhere. And then I put it aside, and then it just popped into my head, just like that. There are many, many examples of that. So Sariputta offers that this is possible by some higher principle. There's a higher intelligence inspiring these various creators, and that's the intelligence of Krishna. So Brahma also, he's the first person to be inspired by the Lord, and the Lord gives him the intelligence to create as before. And it's interesting, he's not given, what would you say, the Lord wasn't interested in creativity in the way that we sometimes think of it. We think of creativity as doing something new and innovative something inspired, by which we mean totally different, never seen or done before, something that's creativity. But the creativity that the Lord was looking for, or that the Lord inspired, was the creative ability to do what had already been done before. Once again, that's what the Lord wanted in creation. Not that one creation we get round planets, next creation we get ovoids, next one we get square planets. Do something new, just do something new. He's inspired to create what had been created before, the same forms, the same names. We're going to have another go at it. Okay, any comments here? Mukesh says, in the previous verse, it is mentioned, this lotus is the reservoir of the conditioned souls. So we did exist before the creation of this universe. Lord Brahma was the first living being who came out. Brahma's a post. I just wanted to check with that. Everything's already outlined by the Lord. Lord Brahma just being an instrument at a given time. Is this true? Yes. First thing is that we did exist before the creation of the universe. The Lord says, na tvam na tvevaham jatu nasam na tvam neme janadipa. He told Arjuna, there was never a time when I didn't exist, nor you, nor all these kings. Elsewhere, Najayate Mriyate Va Kadachin. For the living entity, there's never birth or death at any time. So the living entity himself is not created. He's never created. He's of the same nature as the Lord, that is to say, eternal. But he's placed within the material energy, where he's associated with material bodies that are created and destroyed again and again. So we certainly existed before the creation of this universe. And at the time of creation, therefore, we come out with our different desires, our different propensities, our different capabilities, because we were existing before. It's the same principle that we see as we travel from lifetime to lifetime. We come out in different forms, and someone is, Sadhaputta deals with this also. You have your child prodigies. And how is that possible? Young, child prodigies. How is it that they had these wonderful capabilities? It's not easily explained by genetics. It seems to defy our genetic explanation. But the explanation given by the Bhagavatam is that according to the previous activities and desires of the living entity, previous merit of the living entity, he's given he has a certain destiny, he's given a certain body, and along with that, certain capabilities. So we existed in a previous life, and therefore we have this life with its ups and its downs. We have the pious credit for which we're able to get some advantage, and we have our impious credit for which we're suffering from disadvantages. So why is it like that? Someone gets more suffering, someone gets less suffering, more happiness materially, less happiness. It's on account of previous activities or the activities of our previous birth. The same, the change from one birth to another involves a destruction and recreation. And the same thing happens from universal destruction to the next universal creation. Living entities are put into a suspended state, and then they come out and they begin from where they left off. And yes, the Lord gives the outline essentially, and Brahma is the instrument. There's an architect, and then there's a contractor. The contractor devises everything, but according to the directions of the architect. Okay, anything else here? Sasarja chaya vidyam panchaparvam agutaha tamishram andatamishram tamo moho mahatamaha. First of all, Brahma created from his shadow the coverings of ignorance of the conditioned souls. They are 5 in number and are called Tamishra, Antatamishra, Tamas, Moha, and Maham. In the shadow of the Lord, these different forms of illusion or ignorance appear. Now, this is going to be a fairly lengthy purport. I'm just wondering what. Well, that's certainly a comment. So I'm just wondering whether to dive into this region of the various coverings of ignorance, or whether we're sort of just on the cusp. We could go that way or not. Are there any other questions while we're trying to decide that question? Okay. Let's dive in then and see where this goes. Conditioned souls, or living entities who come to the material world to enjoy sense gratification, are covered in the beginning by 5 different conditions. The first condition is a covering of tamishra, or anger. Constitutionally, each and every living entity has minute independence. It is misuse of that minute independence for the conditioned soul to think that he can also enjoy like the Supreme Lord, or to think, why shall I not be a free enjoyer like the Supreme Lord? That's tamishra. This forgetfulness of its constitutional position is due to anger or envy. The living entity, being eternally a part and parcel servitor of the Supreme Lord, can never, by constitution, be an equal enjoyer with the Lord. When he forgets this, however, and tries to be one with him, his condition is called tamishra. Even in the field of spiritual realization, this tamishra mentality of the living entity is hard to overcome. In trying to get out of the entanglement of material life, there are many who want to be one with the Supreme. Even in their transcendental activities, this lower grade mentality of tamishra continues. So that's a condemnation of the impersonalists. They're on the spiritual path, but they too succumb to this false idea let me be on top. Let me be the supreme. So that's also Tamishra, ignorance. Therefore, this impersonalism, Srila Prabhupada describes as the last snare of ignorance, or the last snare of Maya, or illusion. Andhatamishra involves considering death to be the ultimate end. The atheists generally think that the body is the self, and that everything is therefore ended for the end of the body. Thus, they want to enjoy material life as far as possible during the existence of the body. Their theory is, as long as you live, you should live prosperously. Never mind whether you commit all kinds of so-called sins, you must eat sumptuously, beg, borrow, and steal. And if you think that by stealing and borrowing, you are being entangled in sinful activities for which you will have to pay, then just forget that misconception, because after death, everything is finished. No one is responsible for anything he does during his life. This atheistic conception of life is killing human civilization, for it is without knowledge of the continuation of eternal life. This is the Jayadvaita philosophy. All right, I think, why don't we stop here where I don't think we'll get through the full purport this evening. So we can pick up here on Wednesday from where we're leaving off. Are there any other questions before we jump into Kirtan? So there are 5 coverings, and we've dealt at least with Tamishra and to some extent with Andhatamishra. All right, and we're ready for Kirtan. And is that Sadhusevan who volunteered? Okay.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupada Paramhamsa Pariprajaka Ashtottara Sri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kundaradha Kundagiri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Go Premanande. Thank you very much for the information of our host who lost power for a while. We're in text 18, in the midst of the purport, the paragraph beginning, this unto Mishra ignorance is due Thomas. That's where we are. And thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mahesh Pandit Prabhu. Thank you to Doug. Hare Krishna.
Jai Haribol. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Shraddha Devi. And thank you to all.
Thank you, Maharaj, and thank you to everyone for joining us tonight. Please share those class links with your friends, and we look forward to seeing you all again on Wednesday for Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj ki jai.
Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande.